Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
Hi, I'm Susan, and I'm a college counselor and have read applications for a small liberal arts college and 2 research universities. My twins are recent college graduates.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of 2 daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at the Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, a college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. Good afternoon, friends. We have a few announcements today, and then Susan will answer a question from Stacy, who's a college counselor in San Diego. And she has a great one. Stacy wants to know, why is NYU advising students not to select the last prompt when writing their Common App essay, their personal statement? And I said this at the end of episode 509, but I'll say it again. I've never learned so much on a QFL, a question from a listener, as I did hearing Susan's take on this question. After this, we have a brand new interview, and it is a very thought-provoking one. In fact, it's as thought-provoking an interview, in my opinion, as we have had on the Your College Bound Kid podcast. And last I checked, this is interview 219. I interviewed Kathleen DeLaski on her brand new book, Who Needs College Anymore? And the subtitle is Imagining a Future Where Degrees Won't Matter. It's a 5-parter, which means I interviewed her for over an hour and a half on 2 different sessions. In fact, the first session went so well, we said, let's do this again and continue. So we're going to chunk it out in bite-sized segments of around 20 minutes each. All right, let's get to the announcement. So, counselors, our second Counselor Connect meeting will be on Sunday, February 23rd, 8 Eastern, 7 Central, 6 Mountain, and 5 Pacific. Be on the lookout for an email from Michelle with a lot of very important information, including how to access our Slack message board with the Slack channels. And it's so exciting for me to see the geographic diversity we have in our subgroups. So I'm just going to share with you just the locations of the college counselors in one of our subgroups. Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Brazil, Wisconsin, California, Georgia, California, New York, Louisiana, Arizona, Rhode Island, Colorado, Florida, California, China, Canada, New Jersey, California, Tennessee, Maryland, and California. And that's just one of them, and they're all like that. So you're going to be learning about our subgroups. You're going to learn a lot. So just be on the lookout for a detailed email, and we look forward to seeing you on Sunday. Friends, I got an email from a podcast listener who is also a Scholar Match counselor. And I didn't understand it at first because it said something like, they're not going to do Scholar Match anymore. And I'm like, what? And then I got another email from another podcast listener, almost the same time, because they were in the same webinar together. And it basically said that a really big donor from the San Francisco area who was bankrolling a lot of Scholar Match has decided to cut back on their funds and just focus on the Bay Area. So they're only going to be using counselors working in the Bay Area, and they're not going to need as many college counselors. And many of you know, I had Scholar Match on here, shared the opportunity, and a number of you signed up. In fact, Scholar Match told me they never had seen so many counselors come in from any other way they've tried to get the word out about their counselors as when they came on our podcast. And I know for a lot of you, it was a source of a lot of joy. So I'm not promising anything, but I just had an idea because just kind of the way I think. I think one of my gifts is being entrepreneurial and visionary. So my thought was this. What if we had some of our listeners who have a student that's going to qualify for the Pell Grant. So that's approximately 40% of the population, but incomes and assets slightly under the national average. Definitely under six figures. Even for a family of 5, 6, 7, it's going to be under six-figure income. What if you reached out to us and said, I'd be interested in college counseling for my student. I don't feel I can afford to pay for a private college counselor. And what if we had former scholar match counselors who love the work because you told me you did and you hated to give it up? What if we paired you up with our own listeners who would love to work with a counselor that's gotten some training and loves the work? It's just a thought I had, not making any promises. So here's what I would like to do. If you're a listener and your student would be Pell Grant eligible, and if you're not sure, we can show you how to take you through a process to let you know how you can check on that. If you reached out to us and said, yeah, I'd be interested in working with a counselor, there won't be any fees. You just have to do the work. But your student could end up at the right match college for them, right college, right price. And I would reach out to scholar match counselors who are listeners to this podcast who have in effect been displaced and said, would you like to take a student on? What if we could pair, who knows, 5 students with 5 counselors or 10 students with 10 counselors? That would mean a lot to everybody. It would expand the access, passion, and it's consistent with our mission of making college knowledge available to all. So I'm going to ask you, if you have a student who'd be interested in working with a counselor and you're Pell Grant eligible, or you think you may be Pell Grant eligible, shoot an email to me at mark@schoolmatch4u.com. If we get a good response, I'll do the same thing for our scholar match counselors, and we'll work at getting you paired up and getting you some college counseling. All right, let's try it and see what we can do. No promises, but if there's a need out there, we'd like to see what we can do to meet it. Now, friends, I mentioned to you on Thursday's episode that I would be sharing with you the articles that will go out in our newsletter. We have a newsletter. It's called YCBK Plus. It's called Plus because we can't possibly get to all of the content that's out there in the world of college and college admissions, even with 2 episodes a week. Things are happening that fast. So we created YCBK Plus to try to fill in some of those gaps. And so we do a lot in there. You get other content besides newsletter links to articles, but it is one of the things that we do is scour the country, try to find articles that would be of interest to you and then that are not behind a paywall. And then you can just click the link and read the articles. And I've had some good feedback from you that you've been really enjoying them. Once again, you get YCBK Plus by just going to yourcollegebounkid.com. Look at the right column of the page. You'll see gray shaded out. It'll say YCBK Plus, sign up. All you do is just put your email in there, and you have to say, I'm a student, I'm a counselor, I'm a parent, or others. That's simple. So here's some of the things that will be in the newsletter that will be going out this week. Before I share them, I do have a confession. I've been struggling, friends. I was on a webinar this week. I was a guest on a webinar, and a lot of it was about the stuff that's going on in the world of higher education related to the new administration. And some of the things they were talking about, I was not aware of. I've been struggling because one of the ways I've been coping is been by trying to remove myself from some of it. But at the same time, it's impacting higher ed so much, I kind of can't do that. Because I can't be an ostrich. I can't get my head out of the sand. So I'm trying to work through that. I'll be really honest with you. I'm struggling finding that balance. But there are quite a few articles in here about some of the changes. Not all of them, but some of them. So here we go. The first article, this is a really important one in my opinion. The Common App is expanding and now allowing community colleges to go on the Common App. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you're going to want to click that one. Another article is on the cancellation of the Education Department's research contracts. and how that is sparking a lot of concerns. There's another article on how interest in QuestBridge students is on the rise. So QuestBridge is the nation's largest program at matching gifted and talented, under-resourced students across all races and ethnicities in 52 of the most selective schools in this country, and the opportunity potentially to get a full cost of attendance scholarship so the parent has a zero contribution. And a lot of schools have been taking a lot more interest, a lot more QuestBridge students than before, and QuestBridge apps are way up. So if that's an interest to you, that article will be in there. There's another article on student group is suing the education department over the Doge access to sensitive data. So that's going to be an interesting lawsuit. And then there's another article on college applications are due soon and parents are feeling the stress. This isn't more of an opinion column, but it's dealing with the stress that parents are feeling, not students, with this college process. There's another article on how Hegseth is ordering military academies to end all affirmative action. There's an article in there that looks at what are the nation's universities that have the most international students. So it looks at the 20 universities in the country that have the highest percentage of international students. There's another article on the education department is now cutting non-binary option off from the FAFSA. That used to be an option and no longer is. So there's an article on that. And Texas A&M, which has been one of the nation's largest universities and growing rapidly, is pausing their enrollment growth. So they're no longer expanding their enrollment. There's an article on that. They're trying to get to what they call the right size. And there's an article on accreditors are bracing for Trump's higher ed shakeup. So it just looks at what other things are going to be shaken up in the new administration. And then lastly, NIH funding policy temporarily blocked. So this is one of the things that's really caused a lot of stir has been the reduction in research funding to institutes like the National Institute of Health. But a judge is temporarily at least blocking that. That's new news this week. So normally we have about 7 articles, but there's so much going on in the world of higher ed that we decided to give you 10 this week. All right, friends, let's dive in with our content.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
So, Susan, this question we're about to play is very special to me. It's from Stacy Boodman, and you may remember when I did my big California trip, we did a San Diego YCBK gathering, and it was at Stacy's home.
How nice.
And it was lovely, and I loved it. And so thank you, Stacy, for hosting that event. That was a lot of fun. She's a college counselor in San Diego. I'm going to play the question, and let's get your thoughts.
Great.
Hi, Mark. This is Stacy Boodman. I'm an independent college counselor from San Diego. I absolutely love your podcast, as you know. And I had a quick question regarding the Common App personal statement. I know that NYU tells you to shy away from the share about any topic. I wanted to get your opinion on that last prompt and see what you think about a student choosing that. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Where do you want to go with this one, Susan?
Well, I think this is fascinating, and I'm delighted to have a chance to pontificate about this one because I'm shocked, first of all, that NYU would actually say that, although they're members of the Common App organization, and I hope they are expressing that opinion to Common App because Common App only exists to serve its member institutions, right? And they should know if a college is very dissatisfied with an essay prompt. But anyway, so apparently if NYU is saying this to steer people away from the topic of your choice, I get it. I understand that. I would never, from an admissions office, say that. But being in the middle of the reading season right now, This is the hardest prompt to reply to.
Do you think it's harder than the one? For me, the hardest one is that one, the newer one where you're talking about somebody else that's played a role in your life, but you can't make it about them. You have to make it about you. That one is tricky.
Well, all the other Common App prompts, kids have to write for this purpose. They know when they write it that they are writing a college application essay, right? So when they write it, they're writing with their audience in mind. The essay has a purpose that basically they know it needs to serve their cause, right? To further their attractiveness as an applicant to that college. Topic of your choice can be any old random piece of writing that you've done for an assignment, for your journal. Now I'm not saying that's what Common App is asking for, but that's how kids treat it.
How often have you seen that, Susan? How often have you seen? So that's probably what NYU is referring to.
I would say most often when it's a topic of your choice, the essay is not doing what the Common App prefaces, the instructions. So
Sure.
The instructions in Common App say, the essay demonstrates your ability to write clearly and concisely on a selected topic and helps you distinguish yourself in your own voice. What do you want the readers of your application to know about you apart from courses, grades, and test scores? So the problem isn't the prompt. The problem is that kids are choosing a piece of writing that does not follow the instructions that I just read. So if a student wrote an essay on a topic of her choice with this in mind, understanding that the audience is the readers of your application, and the goal of the essay is to share information that sets apart from academic credentials that you want the admissions office to know. Very often, topic of your choice becomes a creative writing piece or a character study from a book. It's an assignment, I think, most often that the student has written and they're proud of it. But it is not written for the audience to this purpose. So it could be a nice piece of writing, right? And that we give it its due. And this goes for all three institutions that I've read applications for. We give it its due. It's well written. The mechanics are good. So when we read an essay, we give most colleges, and we give what's called a mechanics score and an intellectual caliber score. So an essay can get a pretty good mechanics score, but then if it isn't unpacking the student's interests, intellectual curiosity, it's going to get a 0 on that side. It might get a strong number on the mechanics side, but kids are giving away points they don't have to give up, I guess is what I'm saying. So if you write on a topic of your choice with the audience in mind and the mission, which is clearly explained in Common App, you'll be fine. But I think NYU is reacting to the fact that most of those topics of your choice are really random pieces of writing. The other, I happen to be a big fan, Mark, of titles. And I think you're not, but
No, I'm agnostic on it. I've seen titles be great, and I've seen titles lose some of the inductiveness. That could be nice. But yeah, most of the time they've been good.
Yeah, I find a title is an invitation. And when we were at school together, I impressed this on our kids all the time, that it shouldn't be my first day at the beach, or, my dog Fido. But it could be something that alludes to the theme that the reader is about to engage in. It could be a visual glimpse of something in the essay that harkens to the substance that the reader is going to get. It can be very, very effective in this kind of writing. So if you're going to write on a topic of your choice, I guess I would say have a darn good title is my advice. Read the instructions, have a great title, and make sure you know your audience.
Susan, I wish that I could go back and be a reader now, because even that I'm reading applications all the time from students, every once in a while you'll say something and I miss it because, like, so we were talking before we started today that we were not aware that NYU was saying this, and I have no reason to believe Stacy. She's sharp. I'm
Oh,
sure she's
yeah.
right. And to be honest, it was perplexing to me. And the reason it's perplexing is because the way in which I work with my students, nobody would ever give me an assignment from, for a personal statement because of the training that goes on before they even produce it. So I didn't think of that. But you think of the whole landscape of students that are out there that aren't getting any guidance. And of course, I don't know, but I think I would be quite surprised if that's not the reason why NYU gave that advice, is because they're getting some paper for some,
Yeah.
And
the cause of the War of 1812, or, why the Berlin Wall came down. Things like this are nice writing samples. And, but, obviously the student feels, gee, well, this is a good piece of writing. It's my topic. I'm going to submit it, but they don't read the instructions.
Yeah, it's I think it's awesome that you get to do that. And even, talking to Julia, because she'd been away from reading for a while, and she's reading tons and tons and tons on the sending side. But she said going back and becoming a reader again at Haverford was great training for her.
Absolutely. Oh boy, absolutely.
And opened up the eyes. And we do get a lot when we see all of our student work, but that's the kind of thing that I'm missing because I'm providing instruction at first, so nobody would ever submit a paper to me. So I never even thought that that's what happened. What percentage of the time would you say, for topic of your choice, somebody's doing that? Is it more than 5, 10%, or is it?
Gee, I'm always interested in the end of year statistics from Common App, because every year they do publish how many kids write on the different essay prompts. In my experience as a reader, oh boy, no, not more than 5%. Right. I probably see, if I read 40 applications in a day, I probably see 4 or 5. Truth be told,
of course, they have to pick topic of your choice. First of all, you'd have to isolate that one prompt and to do this.
The thing is I don't always notice the prompt.
Yeah.
If I dive into an essay and it's great content, sure, and I'm learning something about the student that illuminates that application, I'm not necessarily remembering at all what the prompt is.
That's, I think, true of pretty much everybody. At least I consistently hear that from people I talk to, and that's how I read as well. Right. That's why, quite honestly, I don't. So let's talk about this. The Common App releases the 7 prompts, and I've seen them do it anywhere from the end of January into the first week of March. I wish they'd be more consistent, but I don't find it's risky for me to work on a personal statement with somebody before they release the prompts, because
sure.
Yeah, as long as you do what it says, you're reflecting about yourself and helping the school to get to know you. You can always do that, then go back and say, okay, this looks like it is closest to prompt 2 versus prompt. That you'll never have to worry, if you follow the basic instructions, that there won't be a prompt that would fit what you're saying about. And if you did have to use topic of your choice, it would be an appropriate use.
Right.
Yeah. So I agree. That's a question a lot of times students will ask you, should this be number 1 or number, and they think it's a real high stakes game. And I'm thinking, right, on the other hand, the college is happy you've done what they've wanted them to do, but, let's go ahead and pick one of these here. I find that fascinating that, that you might get a paper for somebody on the War of 1812 in there on a topic like that,
Well, if the kids aren't reading the instructions, which I fear that hardly anybody reads any of the instructions, why else would we be getting activities lists that are chronological instead of in order of importance? Part of the test of filling out any application is following directions. We know this as adults, whether you're
Sure.
applying at a credit union or, for a job. If you have a chance to show that you are a careful reader and to make sure you're clear in your own mind what the questions are. And that really shows in an application, because it shows when the pieces hang together carefully, when additional information truly is additional as opposed to a reiteration of everything you already said in the activities list. When your activities reflect your growing commitment and sense of importance of certain things where you spend your time. Your supplementary questions are showing formation of your character and thoughtful use of your time. That's what brings an application to life. There's the physics principle of synergy, and you've heard me say this before, that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And a lot of applications are parts, and there's nothing wrong with them. But when they all come together, you don't have that sense of, oh, now I understand. Now I see how the student has come to life, for me. And it's a remarkable thing that does distinguish some applications.
And really nothing should surprise me, Susan, because think about how many students out there don't have any guidance.
Oh, yeah.
Like no guidance at all. And so many of the things that we might think of as just a basic error or missed opportunity, however you want to phrase it, it's kind of easy to make that if nobody's really giving you any guidance. I heard another admission officer say something recently, and I'm curious your take on this, but she said, you would be surprised how many people in this test optional world will still send in a bad score,
Yep.
and they just do it. And then, once again, no guidance, or just not. Do you see that fairly frequently? Like, gee, if you would have had any counsel, you wouldn't have sent this in. I mean, I know you've got a way of not having that hurt the student. We talked about that before in your rating system. But how often do you see someone just send a score that if you had any counsel, you would say you probably don't want to send that in?
Once in a while.
Yeah.
I think what happens is kids make a decision about sending scores unilaterally, and they decide their score is, at or above, maybe it's in the middle 50% for all of their colleges, but they don't, if they're even processing it on that level. And I think what you're referring to, Mark, is they're kids who aren't they don't know to pay attention to that. As the do no harm policy catches on, that I think it's a fine thing. I think that's a good thing, but it is going to confuse kids who will then be submitting, bottom 25% scores to colleges that are optional, but it will be harmful. I mean, colleges don't want to penalize kids who clearly haven't prepped, aren't from a college background, maybe in a minority of students from the high school that are applying to four-year colleges. But in a way, if the instructions say it's optional, I just don't think admissions offices do the best job of helping kids make the decision about submitting or not submitting.
No, I agree. Stacy, that was a great question.
Excellent.
And my immediate reaction was, NYU's out there saying that? I hadn't heard that, but I haven't been on a recent webinar from them. And I think, Susan, I think you nailed it. Because when I read that, my initial reaction was, why would they say that? Because I'm assuming that somebody's doing all the things the Common App's telling them to do. And they just don't feel that most of the time, one of those other options does work, though, if you're really doing what you say, because there's quite a lot of latitude covered by those other prompts. I can't even remember, honestly, the last time when I said, you know what, topic of your choice looks like it fits better than anything here, because almost always somebody's, one of those other prompts covers the main things that bring out who you are and brings the person to life. Oh, that was good, Susan. Thank you.
Great discussion.
Yeah, great discussion. And I learned something. People are sending in their their history paper for topic of your choice sometimes. Oh, well. Oh, Stacy, don't forget, you probably have all of them because you're a college counselor. But if you don't have any of those books, you are entitled to one of 4 books, courtesy of the Princeton Review. You've got their best 390 colleges, essays that kick apps, the new digital SAT, and then there's just an overview on college admissions. Just, you have my email, but it's marketschoolmatch, number 4 letter u.com, and just put in the title of the book you want, and we'll get it right out to you. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Stacy.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, on part 1 of my interview with Kathleen DeLaski. Kathleen shares her very interesting background. Kathleen tells us what the Educational Design Lab is and what they do. Kathleen tells us why she wrote her book, and she opens up and shares some very interesting things about her own kids. I introduced Kathleen's book, Who Needs College Anymore? Kathleen answers the question, why should our listeners who love college listen to an author who wrote a book titled Who Needs College Anymore? Kathleen tells us some of the careers that require college. Kathleen shares some statistics on the percentage of people that do not have a degree. Kathleen talks about the Wall Street Journal study that asks students if they think college is worth it. Kathleen begins the conversation on factors that serve as accelerants to make a college degree not as essential as it used to be for some jobs. Listen and enjoy. Good afternoon, friends. I am here with a special guest, Kathleen DeLaski. How are you, Kathleen?
I'm well. Thank you for having me on the show.
Well, I have one sister, and we're very close, and her name is Kathleen.
That's wonderful, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So if I forget your name or something, I'm losing it over here. So, friends, I'm going to have Kathleen introduce herself. She has quite a fascinating and distinctive career where she's wear a lot of hats. But I'll just say one thing about her. She has been named by the Washingtonian as one of the most significant policy influencers, and she got that distinction in 2022, 2023, and again in 2024. So, Kathleen, take some time so that listeners will know your background, and they'll understand the context from which you speak.
Well, thank you. Thanks very much. I guess the context for why I wrote this book is really relates to my background. I've spent the past 25 years in various aspects of education reform, first in K-12 and then in higher education. And I've really had an opportunity that I think has been kind of unique among people in education of meeting a lot of the families for whom higher education in particular was not working out. And they either fell along the wayside, as 40% of people who start the college gauntlet do, or they haven't tried in the first place. And I got a lot of that experience when I was at Sallie Mae. Some of you may know Sallie Mae. That's was the largest student lending company, and I started their foundation. So we really worked with the families that didn't qualify for loans to figure out how they could afford college. So I learned a lot about college affordability in that role. I was on the board of a public university here in Virginia for 8 years, and I've spent time working on charter schools around the country, trying to create more quality seats for people who were born into disadvantaged school districts. But probably my biggest piece of background that's relevant here is that about 13 years ago, I started the Education Design Lab, which has become a national nonprofit that works with colleges really to try to themselves create shorter pathways to economic success than the traditional degree. And that work's been really interesting to show kind of who it's working for, who it's not working for. And so those are really my experiences since I've been in higher ed reform. In education reform overall. But the reason I sort of turned to a book in the kind of twilight of my career is that I also was a journalist for 20 years. That was how I started my own career journey, and I sometimes forget that myself because it's been a long time. But
just 20 years.
Yeah, right. but journalism, coming back to write a book about, what I've learned, and advice for all the stakeholders, employers, colleges, high schools, families, seemed like a good use of my time as 10 years after starting the lab, I stepped back from being CEO, and I'm now the board chair for the lab, and I'm doing work with other groups around the country. But writing this book seemed like a really good use of my time to kind of draw attention to the issues. Other impetus for the book and background that might, that some of your listeners might relate to, and that is that I also have had a difficult journey with my own family and my own children as they tried to pursue this sort of expected path that they would, try to get into the best possible college they could. And, they would approach the gauntlet, feeling very confident and good about themselves. And, and they'd be launched on their journeys. And it didn't really happen that way for either of my children. One ended up going to college, but, through a path of community college and a lot of struggles with grades and, attention span and all the things that we could talk about. And the other one didn't go to college. And so that made me kind of feel like an outsider in my, sort of middle class, upper middle class region where I live in Northern Virginia, where everybody has a master's degree at least, And so, I couldn't talk about what my kids were going to be doing on this, like which are they going to UVA, or are they going to Berkeley, or are they going to Vassar? That was never a conversation I could participate in. And that kind of helped me, think like an outsider and really begin to push for multiple pathways to success and coming of age.
That's an excellent background. And we're going to talk about your book. And so Kathleen wrote a book that's called Who Needs College Anymore? And the subtitle is Imagining a World Where College Doesn't Matter. And I will tell you, Kathleen, the book is captivating. I could not put it down.
Wow, thank you.
No, I mean that. And it's the kind of book that our listeners would love to read because they're sponges for knowledge and they like to engage in critical thinking. And I thought you made so many good points in there. So we're going to talk about them today. But before we do, I think there's an elephant in the room, and I think we should acknowledge it right away. So our listeners don't check out, especially with that title. So we have 9 co-hosts, and I reached out to one of our co-hosts originally, and I asked if they were interested in doing the interview. And the response I received was, our listeners love college. That is why they listen to a podcast about college. No one is going to want to hear who needs to go to college anymore. So what would you say to people who love college, who believe college was transformational in their own lives, led to key opportunities that they've had in the last few decades? What would you say to that group? Because they're our listener.
Absolutely. Yes. And, the other elephant in the room, as you say, is that many of us are successful in large part because of our, the networks and the friends and the degrees that we got, along the way ourselves. So that's another reason why, it's right to challenge, am I the right messenger, and is this the right message?
Yeah. And one other thing before
Sure.
you answer that, yeah. I think the biggest fear some of our listeners may have is that their kid goes off to college or doesn't go to college or drops out because they say, hey, I can be an internet influencer.
Absolutely.
Because I've seen someone on YouTube who makes X dollars doing that. And so, I could see someone saying, I don't think I like this message.
Yes.
So take it from here and say what you want to say on that.
Well, yeah. And I'm hearing that all the time. Everybody wants to be an internet influencer or an Instagram influencer. So I think the first answer to the question of, how could you write a book with this title? And the first thing I would say is that the title, the emphasis on the words in the title should go like this: who needs college anymore? Not who needs college anymore, right? So if you get that nuance, the answer is that some people do, and some people would supremely benefit from it. Others could afford to give it a miss or skip it. But I always start out by saying, I love college. I am pro college. I think anyone for whom the path is not just easy, but even doable, practical, should start down that road, particularly if you are an 18 to 24-year-old. I mean, one of the biggest groups of people that I get questions from are people who are, have aged out of the adultification age group that goes to college, right? And they're maybe 28 or 35 or 45, and they are asking, should I go to college? I just had this conversation with my daughter's boyfriend, who is, definitely, in later decades, and he doesn't have a degree, and he was asking me when he heard about the book, should I go back to college? I mean, like, what do you think? Do I need to get the piece of paper? And in his case, I said, no, I don't think you do. He had taught himself to be a Latin translator. And while he's not making a good living as a Latin translator, not a great market for those guys these days, he is making a living, as an internet fixer. And so he really wants to go to college for his own personal growth at this point. Great. If you can afford it and pull it off and don't mind the debt, go for it. So that, that's one group of people who I say, no, you don't have to get a piece of paper unless you are going into one of those careers where, it's probably for many decades to come will require a degree. And those include licensed fields such as being a doctor, being a clinical psychologist, being some, higher levels of nursing. If you want to teach in a high school or a university, these are fields that require a degree. And so, my response to people who have those career interests is, you've got to get started on the gauntlet. Let's talk about the most affordable way you can do it. And there are shortcuts these days, which is, a welcome thing. But the other kind of people who don't need, we can get into that later maybe. But so
Sure.
my point, just to generally answer the question, is there are some people who absolutely need to go to college and some who don't. If your listeners are from families where you've been saving the money, you've got the dollars, absolutely have your young person start on that journey. They can always leave if it's not working out for them. And that's the other piece of advice I give.
Yeah, and I thought that your book really struck that balance masterfully. I think if anybody thinks this is an anti-college book based on the title, it's absolutely not. And, you really delineate that distinction with real eloquence in the book. There's another elephant in the room that I also think we can't ignore. And that's a statistic that you talk about in the book, that college is not working for most people because most people are not going to college. Can you share some of the statistics that you share in the book in terms of the percentage of people that have degrees and the percentage of people that go and drop out, and some of that information that you share?
Sure. Yeah, and this is probably, if you asked, what's the statistic that's most driving your thinking about why we need additional pathways that are funded and well known and advertised, it's this statistic, which is that 62% of American adults do not hold a 4-year degree. And yet we tell, our kids, we tell families that 70% of good jobs require a 4-year degree. And so there's a huge disconnect and, I believe a growing resentment in the populace, among the populace, around this, what some people are labeling the diploma divide, which leaves a majority of adults on, the wrong side of economic opportunity. You asked about how many people try and fail, or for whom it doesn't work out, or they leave for, a variety of reasons. And that's about 40% of the population that attempts to get a 4-year degree. 40% of them, it doesn't work out, or they get opportunities that don't require the degree and they don't finish for, variety of reasons. And that percentage goes up to 50% if you're talking about underserved populations and learners of color, low-income families that may have been from those neighborhoods I talked about where they didn't get as good of a K-12 education, and those numbers are more like 50% of those people. So half the people of color and learners from lower income families who start college do not finish.
And Kathleen, you also talk about statistics in your book of the percentage of people that no longer think college is worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen that number rise very, very dramatically. What do you attribute as the reasons why that number has risen so drastically in the last, decade to two?
Yeah, it has been alarming, and is what started to get my attention back, over a decade ago when, like the Wall Street Journal first started tracking, is college worth it? They would ask Americans. And it started out, like in the 30% of people, a decade ago thought college wasn't worth it. And then it went up to like 40%. And the last time they did it, which was 2023, it was 56% of people felt that college was not worth it. And, I believe that's really driven by, two things. One is the affordability, right? The price of college during that time has crept up at, faster than the rate of inflation. And the second is, what we could put under the category of relevance, right? As the digital world has made information and content more accessible to us and, at our fingertips, learners and, graduate, because these surveys are all ages, right? But learners, adults, millennials, particularly maybe, and Gen X, Gen Z are believing that there are other ways to learn the things that they need on the job. And if they're going to college to get a good job, why isn't college providing more relevant, direct training, skills support to get that first job, which is, the kind of what launches you on your path. And data shows that the first job you get after college is very consequential in your earnings path and your earnings power going forward. And yet, something like 50% of people say that the jobs they have, even 10 years after college, they didn't need to have any degree for. And so there's a disconnect.
Now, this may be a little overlap with what you've already said, but not all of it. So in your book, you talk about 3 factors that serve as accelerants that have come together to make the college degree less essential for some jobs compared to how it used to be. What do you want to say about that?
Yeah. So, obviously the main things happening on the trend line front, right, are that skills are changing so fast. I mean, we're experiencing the biggest skills shakeup probably this is a little bit debatable, but, certainly since the Industrial Revolution, if not before. And what that means is that the rate of change of the skills that you have today versus the ones you'll need in even 5 years when maybe you finish your degree will, might change by 20% or 25%. I mean, I think the one statistic shows that, LinkedIn shows that skills have changed in like 25% in like 7 years. And so, when you think about what does that mean for what you would learn in college, you could say, okay, well, college is supposed to be more theoretical anyway. We're supposed to learn, critical thinking and collaboration and just get a really good baseline. But increasingly at the same time, one of the trends is that learners are expecting that college is going to land them their first job. That's been a change in trends since I went to college, 30, 40 years ago as well, right? Which is that the reason people go to college now is really to get employed versus, in my day, I don't think we thought about it very much. I mean, we were just sort of this idea that you were becoming a citizen of the world, sounded good, right? We weren't so transactional in our thinking as I recall. And surveys bear that out.
Yeah, Jeff Salengo's done some work on this.
Yes, he has.
And he was absolutely shocked to see what people are saying now. And he said the same thing. That thought never even crossed my mind when I went to college.
Mm-hmm.
And now that's completely the expectation. Friends, this concludes this segment of my interview with Kathleen. Hope you join us next week for the next segment. On Thursday's episode, Dave will be back and he'll be discussing an article by David Brooks, basically looking at, is the Ivy League to blame for so many of our problems? And we'll also discuss a rebuttal to that article by Jim Jump from Inside Higher Ed, who disagrees with a lot of the premise of David Brooks's article. And then we'll have 2 questions from a listener. Linda and Lisa are back, and they're going to look at a question that came in. How can I know if a college is going to be supportive for my daughter if they struggle with executive functioning? So Linda and Lisa will take that on. And then Hillary will join me from another question from a listener who wants to know, how is the future plan section of the Common App used? And then we have a brand new interview, and it's a 4-parter. And it looks at the 529 savings plan. Basically, it's a frequently asked question on everything you want to know about 529s. At the end, I was 529'd out because I asked every question I could think of. So that'll run over the next 4 weeks. And it's a return guest on that is Jonathan Hughes and Julie Shields-Retna, our friends from MIFA. And they will be the ones who will conduct that interview. They will be the ones I will be interviewing on everything you want to know about 529 plans. And friends, remember, it's not where you go. It's not where you go. That's what you do when you get there. It's what you do when you get out of there. That is what will determine your career trajectory. See you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Linda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joy Stucker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stalianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Linda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcast. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.